You are useless, Veya. You were useful when I needed someone to believe in me, but belief is not value. Those were the words Breck Calder, 37-year-old husband of Veya and executive of Calder & Quain Buildworks, threw across the dining table during what his family called a strategy meeting. But it was not a meeting, it was a public rejection. Veya Rook, 34-year-old wife of Breck and former project finance specialist, stood near the sideboard while Breck's family watched her humiliation like it had been planned. Beside Breck sat Sable Corrin, 35-year-old mistress of Breck and brand consultant to his family company, smiling softly as if Veya's marriage had already become her seat to take. Orla Calder, 61-year-old mother of Breck, looked at Veya and said the Calder name was the only reason she had ever mattered. Tavon Calder, 63-year-old father of Breck and founder of Calder & Quain Buildworks, said Veya had never belonged in business conversations. Naira Calder, 29-year-old sister of Breck, recorded just enough to make Veya look unwanted, while Pen Calder, 32-year-old brother of Breck and site operations manager, looked away because he knew more than he wanted to admit. Then Breck pushed divorce papers toward her. He did not know that the quiet woman he was throwing away had already become the controlling owner of Pillar Fox Realty Group, the real estate company paying his family's biggest contract. He did not know Pillar Fox's final ownership papers had been signed under Veya's maiden name through the Rook Holding Trust. He did not know his flagship project, Alder Gate, depended on a company that now answered to the wife he had just called useless. Veya could have exposed them that night. She could have told Breck that the project he was bragging about was already under review for ignored compliance notices, false safety confirmations, unpaid subcontractors, and suspicious material substitutions. But she remembered what her attorney warned her. If she acted from pain, they would call it revenge. If she acted from evidence, they would call it enforcement. So Veya removed her wedding ring, placed it beside the divorce papers, and walked out without begging. Weeks later, when Breck arrived at Alder Gate with Sable beside him, showing investors the future he thought nothing could stop, the bulldozers suddenly froze. The cranes locked. The concrete trucks turned away. Dust hung in the air as the stop-work order arrived. And when Breck demanded to see the owner of Pillar Fox, Veya stepped out of a black company vehicle holding the folder that would bring his family to their knees. This is not just a story about divorce. It is about what happens when a man humiliates the only woman holding the contract, the truth, and the power behind his empire. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it is like letting Veya stand alone in that room again. When you subscribe, you stand with every quiet person who was mocked, betrayed, and underestimated before finally rising. Please subscribe now and comment where you are watching from. The hearing almost collapsed before Breck Calder, 37, the ambitious vice president of his family's construction company and Veya's husband, finished his first answer. A woman from the Municipal Development Review Board lifted a thin packet from the table and frowned. She was Leora Trent, 48, the board's senior compliance reviewer, a woman known for stopping multi-million-dollar projects over one missing page. Mr. Calder, Leora said, your proposal references an updated environmental clearance, but I do not see it attached. I also see a liability insurance certificate that expired last month. The room changed instantly. Whispers moved through the rows of chairs. Two investors leaned toward each other. A representative from Pillar Fox Realty Group, the real estate company funding the massive Alder Gate District project, stopped writing and looked up. At the back of the room, Veya Calder, 34, Breck's quiet wife and a former project finance specialist, felt her stomach tighten. She stood behind a row of Calder & Quain staff members, half hidden near the wall. No one had asked her to sit with the family. No one had asked her to review the packet that morning. But Breck had left the draft binder in their car the night before and told her, almost carelessly, bring that with you in case Penn forgot anything. So she had checked it. Not because anyone respected her work, because one missing page could damage the project Breck had built his whole public image around. Alder Gate was not just another construction job. It was Calder & Quain Buildworks' largest contract, the project their lenders were watching, the project Tavon had used to convince private investors that the Calder name was still powerful. If Pillar Fox delayed funding after this hearing, Calder & Quain would not only lose time. They could lose confidence before the first machine rolled onto the land. At the front table, Breck smiled like nothing was wrong, but Veya knew that smile. It was the smile he used when he was one question away from panic. Beside him sat Tavon Calder, 63, Breck's father and founder of Calder and Quain Buildworks. Tavon's jaw stiffened. His fingers tapped the table once, then stopped. That tiny movement told Vea everything. Tavon knew the board had found a weakness. Near the front row, Orla Calder, 61, Breck's mother and the proud heart of the Calder family, held her purse too tightly in her lap. She had spent years telling people her son was born for power. Now she looked like she was silently begging the room not to embarrass him. Behind Orla, Pen Calder, 32, Breck's younger brother and the company's site operations manager, stared down at his phone as if the answer might appear there. Pen was the one who had assured Breck the hearing packet was complete. Naira Calder, 29, Breck's younger sister and the family's social media voice, had been filming clips for her followers minutes earlier. Now even she lowered her phone. Breck cleared his throat. Vea could tell he did not know where the corrected documents were. She had noticed the missing environmental clearance at 2 in the morning when she compared the printed packet with the digital upload log. She had also noticed the expired insurance certificate, found the updated version in Breck's forwarded email chain, and quietly sent it to Maurice Holt, 42, Breck's executive assistant at Calder and Quain, so it could be added to the digital supplement before the hearing. The answer existed. Breck just did not know where. Vea grabbed the printed hearing agenda from a nearby chair. With a pen from her purse, she wrote fast on the back. Updated environmental clearance is in Appendix F digital supplement. Corrected insurance certificate is binder tab 7, page 14. Say Pillafox received revised copy at 6:42 p.m. from Maurice Holt. Her hand shook, but her mind stayed clear. She folded the agenda once and stepped toward Pen. Pen looked annoyed when she touched his sleeve. "What?" he whispered. "Give this to Breck," Vea said. Pen glanced at the paper. His eyes narrowed, but he saw the details and moved quickly. He walked to the front and placed the folded agenda beside Breck's hand. Breck looked down. For 1 second his face changed. Then he lifted his head and smiled again. "Thank you for pointing that out," he said to Leora. "The updated environmental clearance is included in Appendix F of the digital supplement. The corrected liability certificate is in binder tab 7, page 14. Pillafox received the revised copy yesterday evening at 6:42 from our office." The Pillafox representative opened her laptop and searched the upload log. She was Meryl Cade, 44, Pillafox's senior development liaison assigned to observe Aldergate's approval process. A long, painful silence followed. Then Meryl nodded. "That is correct," she said. "Please continue." The room breathed again. Breck continued smoothly, as if he had known the answer all along. His voice became stronger. Tavon's shoulders relaxed. Orla pressed a hand to her chest. Naira raised her phone again. By the end of the hearing, the board gave conditional approval for the next phase. Calder and Quain had survived, but only because the missing documents had been located before the board could delay the file. People surrounded Breck immediately. Tavon clapped him on the back. "That is how a Calder handles pressure." Orla wiped proud tears from her eyes. "My son was made for these rooms." Naira posted a photo of Breck smiling beside the hearing table. Her caption read, "My brother was born for rooms like this." Vea stood behind the chairs, holding the pen she had used to save him. No one tagged her, no one thanked her, no one even looked back to see where the answer had come from. And still, for a moment, Vea felt proud. Not proud of being ignored, proud that Breck had survived. She had loved him for 8 years. She had watched him turn fear into confidence, debt into contracts, and his family name into something people wanted to stand near. She had helped more than anyone knew, not from a kitchen, not from weakness, but from public rooms like this one, where one missing page could cost millions and one quiet woman could save the day without being seen. Her phone buzzed. Vea stepped into a side hallway, away from the noise. The message was from Callan Rue, 45, a corporate attorney who represented her private business interests under her maiden name. The message was addressed to Vea Rook, not Vea Calder. Her pulse shifted. Callan wrote, "Holly's estate has signed the final transfer. Pillafox Realty Group is now under your controlling interest through the Rook Holding Trust. Keep ownership confidential until internal board notice is completed. Contractor reviews are active. Do not discuss with any contractor or contractor-connected party." Vea read it twice. Then one line made her stop breathing for a second. Calder and Quain is one of the contractors under review. A memory opened inside her. Years earlier, at a development breakfast, Holly's Vane, 72, the agging founder of Pillafox and later Vea's mentor, had dropped a thick contract packet near her chair. Breck had been across the room chasing investors and barely noticed her. Vaya helped Hollies gather the pages, then saw a clause that made her pause. "This sentence pays a builder before it protects the owner," she had told him quietly. Hollies had looked at her as if he had finally heard the smartest voice in the room. After that, he sent her old contracts to review, then small advisory files, then private equity papers. Over time, he trusted her more than the loud men who tried to impress him. When his health failed and his relatives tried to sell Pillowfox for parts, Hollies chose Vaya to protect the company because she understood numbers, risk, workers, families, and consequences. Now the company was hers, and the company was investigating her husband's family. Vaya closed her phone when she heard footsteps. Breck walked into the hallway glowing from praise. "There you are," he said. "Everyone is looking for me, big day." She smiled softly. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to say, "Breck, Pillowfox is mine now. I can help, but only if something is wrong and we handle it honestly." But before she could speak, Orla appeared behind him. "There you are, Vaya," Orla said with a thin smile. "We thought you got lost. These business rooms must be exhausting for you." Breck laughed lightly, not cruelly, not loudly, but he laughed, and somehow that small laugh hurt more than the insult. Vaya looked at him, waiting for him to correct his mother. He did not. He only checked his watch and turned back toward the celebration. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Callan appeared. "Do not mention ownership to anyone connected to Calder and Quain. Early review shows possible billing irregularities. Conflict protocols must be followed." Vaya looked through the hallway glass at Breck laughing beside his family. For the first time, love and suspicion stood in the same room. And somewhere beyond the celebration, someone inside Calder and Quain was already preparing to hide the very files Pillowfox had requested. Vaya saw the woman touch her husband before Breck saw Vaya watching. It happened in the middle of the private image event Calder and Quain hosted 3 days after the hearing. The room was full of investors, subcontractors, polished smiles, and quiet fear. Everyone acted like they were celebrating the Aldergate district, but Vaya could feel the pressure under the music. This event was not only about success. It was about convincing people that Calder and Quain was stronger than it really was. Breck stood near a glass display of the Aldergate model, smiling as if the whole project already belonged to him. Tavon spoke loudly with investors. Orla floated from group to group, collecting praise as if it were owed to her. Penn kept checking his phone. Naira moved around the room taking photos, careful to capture Breck from his best angles. Then Naira brought a woman to Breck. "This is the person I told you about," Naira said, sounding pleased with herself. "She can make Breck the face of modern construction leadership." The woman smiled like she had practiced the exact shape of it in a mirror. She was Sable Corrin, 35, a brand consultant Naira had recently met through investor circles, and the woman who would soon become Breck's secret lover. She wore a deep cream dress, gold earrings, and the relaxed confidence of someone who entered rooms already searching for the weakest marriage. Sable stepped close to Breck, too close for a first meeting in public. "Your speech at the hearing was impressive," she said. Breck smiled. "You were there?" "Of course," Sable said. "Men with vision are worth studying." Vaya stood only a few feet away, holding a folder of updated project notes Breck had asked her to bring. Those notes included the same details that had saved him at the hearing, plus a revised talking point list he had asked her to polish at breakfast. But Sable did not look at the folder. She did not look at Vaya either, not at first. Instead, she reached up and fixed Breck's lapel. It was a small movement, soft, quick, easy for others to ignore, but Vaya felt it like a slap. Before Vaya could step forward, Sable smiled and said, "There, now you look like the man everyone came to see." Breck laughed. He did not move away. Orla noticed and smiled with approval. "Sable understands presentation," she said. "That is rare." Vaya waited for Breck to introduce her properly. He did not. Sable finally turned her eyes to Vaya. "And you must be Breck's wife." "Not Vaya, not Mrs. Calder, just Breck's wife." Vaya answered calmly. "Vaya." Sable's smile did not change. "Of course." The word sounded polite, but it carried a quiet dismissal. A few minutes later, Tressa Lorne, 38, Sable's public relations friend and gossip strategist, joined Naira near the dessert table. Tressa had sharp eyes, a soft voice, and the dangerous habit of making cruelty sound like advice. She looked across the room at Vaya and whispered to Naira, "Your brother photographs like a future industry leader, but his wife makes the image feel smaller." Naira glanced at Vaya's simple navy dress. "I have been saying that for years." Tressa lifted her phone. "Then stop framing him with her. Frame him with ambition." After that, Naira's photos changed. She took Breck beside the project model. Breck beside Tavon, Breck laughing with Sable, Sable leaning toward him while investors smiled. When Vea appeared in the corner of one picture, Naira cropped her out before posting it. Vea saw it happen, she said nothing. That was the part of her life people misunderstood. Her silence was not ignorance, it was measurement. She measured tone, she measured distance. She measured who laughed when someone else was being erased. Sable moved through the room like she belonged to the family already. She called Breck B when handing him a glass of water. Breck did not correct her. She praised his vision in front of investors, though Vea knew Breck had repeated lines they had practiced together the night before. She leaned close to Orla and said, "Men at Breck's level need women who understand optics." Orla's face warmed with instant approval. Exactly. Vea felt the room slowly rearranging itself around her, not with chairs, with loyalty. Then her phone buzzed. It was Callan. Vea stepped into a quieter hallway and answered. Callan's voice was controlled but serious. "The ownership transfer is complete. The estate filing is locked, and the Rook Holding Trust has controlling interest, but the board announcement is still internal and confidential. No one connected to Calder and Quain should know yet." Vea looked back through the glass. Breck was laughing with Sable. "I understand," Vea said. "There is more," Callan continued. Pillowfox Compliance requested documents from Calder and Quain twice before the hearing. They have not responded properly. Vea's chest tightened. "What kind of documents?" "Material purchase records, subcontractor payment confirmations, and safety compliance logs for Alder Gate." Vea closed her eyes for 1 second. Those were not small files. Those were the bones of the project. Callan added, "Vea, until we know more, do not discuss Pillowfox with your husband, not even casually. Because of the marriage, anything you say can be twisted later as pressure, warning, or revenge." The instruction hurt because she had wanted to tell Breck everything. She had imagined taking his hand, telling him Holly's trusted her with Pillowfox, and watching pride replace all the careless little insults. Instead, she was standing in a hallway being warned not to trust the man she loved with the truth. When Vea returned to the event, she did not see Breck near the model. She saw the edge of Sable's cream dress disappearing near a service corridor. Then she heard Breck's voice. Vea stopped before turning the corner. Breck and Sable stood partly hidden beside a closed staff door. Breck was holding Sable's hand, not by accident, not politely. His thumb moved across her fingers in a way that belonged to secrecy. Sable's voice was low, but clear. "You cannot keep presenting me as a consultant forever. If you want investors to see you as serious, you need to stop dragging that quiet little wife around." Vea's breath caught. Breck did not pull his hand away. "After the family meeting she will understand," he said. "I will make it clean." Sable gave a soft, cruel laugh. "No, make it public. She needs to know she was never in my league." Vea pressed one hand against the wall to steady herself. Breck still did not reject it. He only said, "My mother already agrees." That was enough. Vea had caught the affair, but the affair was not the deepest wound. The deepest wound was hearing that her removal had become a family plan. Breck was not being stolen in a sudden moment of weakness. He was choosing to throw her away in front of people. A memory rose so sharply it almost broke her. Years earlier, Breck had sat beside her in an empty parking lot after losing a small contract. He had been younger then, scared and honest. Vea had reviewed the failed proposal and pointed out 3 mistakes. Breck had taken her hand and said, "You see danger before I do. That is why I need you beside me." Now another woman was telling him Vea damaged his image, and Breck was listening. Vea stepped backward before they saw her. Every part of her wanted to walk around the corner and ask him how long he had been lying, but Callan's warning still rang in her mind. Pillowfox was hers now, but it was not public. Calder and Quain was under review. If she exploded tonight, Breck's family could later call every legal action personal revenge. So Vea did the hardest thing she had ever done. She let him think she knew nothing. Later that night, when the event ended and Breck was surrounded by people praising him again, Vea stood outside near the valet area with the cold air touching her face. Her phone rang. It was Brielle Knox, 34, Vea's closest friend from her finance career and the only person who knew how much of herself Vea had buried to help Breck rise. "You sound like someone who just found a body but cannot call the police yet," Brielle said after hearing Vea breathe. Vea looked through the window at Breck standing beside Sable. "Not a body," she whispered. "A marriage." That night Vea did not sleep. She opened the Pillowfox review file Callan had sent through the secure portal. The first contractor listed was Calder and Quain Buildworks, and beneath it, in red letters, was a note that made her hands go still. unresolved compliance risk before investor walkthrough. Contractor has ignored 2 document requests. Escalation recommended if records remain missing. Vaya stared at the line until dawn. Her husband was planning to discard her. His company was hiding records from the company she now owned, and she understood finally that the 2 betrayals were moving toward the same collision. The moment Vaya entered the colder dining room, she knew the meeting was not about business. It was an execution dressed as dinner. The long table was already full. Breck sat at the head like a judge. Sable sat beside him in the chair that should have belonged to Vaya. Orla sat near Sable, proud and still, as if she had arranged every detail. Tavon had investor folders stacked in front of him. Pen would not look up. Naira held her phone low, pretending not to record. Tressa stood behind Naira's chair, whispering something in her ear. At the far side of the room sat Win Paris, 46, Calder and Quain's nervous company accountant, a man who always looked like he knew more than he wanted to say. Beside him was Dover Rill, 52, Calder and Quain's project manager for Aldergate, a broad-shouldered man responsible for keeping the construction schedule moving. 2 family investors were also present. Garen Voss, 58, a private lender tied to Calder and Quain's expansion loans, and Milo Thorne, 41, a quiet investor who had put money behind Aldergate because Tavon promised fast returns. Tavon had invited them because he wanted Breck's divorce, Sable's rise, and the Aldergate strategy to look like one controlled transition instead of a family fracture. Vaya looked at the table again. There was no chair beside Breck. A smaller chair had been placed near the sideboard, close to the serving dishes, away from the family line. That chair told her the truth before anyone spoke. They had not invited her to join the meeting. They had invited her to be removed. Orla smiled first. There you are, Vaya. We were beginning to think you would make us wait. Vaya stayed calm. You said it was a family strategy meeting. It is, Tavon said. Sit down. His voice was firm, but something under it sounded strained. Vaya noticed the folder in front of Win. His fingers were pressed against it so tightly that the paper bent. The label read, Aldergate Payment Reconciliation. Vaya's mind went back to the Pillar Fox review file. Material records missing. Payment confirmations missing. Safety logs incomplete. 2 requests ignored. Then Breck moved. He picked up a cream envelope and slid it across the table. It stopped halfway between them. Divorce papers. For a few seconds, no one breathed. Vaya looked at Breck, not at the envelope. Breck leaned back in his chair. His face was polished, almost empty, like he had practiced this in a mirror until he could say it without shame. This family is entering a new level, he said. I cannot keep pretending this marriage fits the future I'm building. The words were quiet, but they cut through the room. Vaya's eyes moved to Sable. Sable did not look surprised, she looked satisfied. A man with a flagship project needs a woman who can stand beside him, Sable said softly, not behind him looking grateful. Orla gave a small nod, as if Sable had spoken wisdom. You were lucky Breck carried you this long, Orla said. Naira lifted her phone a little higher. Everyone knows you brought nothing but silence and old dresses. Tressa leaned toward Naira and whispered, get her face when she opens the envelope, not too much, just enough. Vaya heard it, so did Breck. He did not tell them to stop. That was when something inside Vaya slowed down. The pain was there, sharp and hot, but around it came a strange quiet. She saw every face. She heard every breath. She understood that this was not a sudden betrayal. This was a planned one. Breck placed both hands on the table. You are useless, Vaya, he said. The room went still. He continued, almost crueler because his voice stayed calm. You were useful when I needed someone to believe in me, but belief is not value. Loyalty does not build an empire. You do not lead. You do not inspire confidence. You just stand in the background and call it sacrifice. Vaya felt the word useless land in her chest, not because it was true. Because he knew exactly where to place it. This was the same man who had once brought her every proposal before a meeting, the same man who used to wait for her red pen, the same man who had once whispered in a parking lot, you see danger before I do, that is why I need you beside me. Now he was using the room as a weapon, and the woman beside him was smiling. Vaya could have ended it right there. She could have told them Pillar Fox Realty Group was hers. She could have told Tavon that the company paying Aldergate answered to her signature now. She could have watched every proud face at that table collapse, but Callan's warning held her back. The ownership announcement was not public. The contractor review was active. Calder and Quain was under investigation. Because Vaya was married to Breck, any emotional confrontation could give them a defense story later. They would say she used power because her feelings were hurt. They would turn enforcement into revenge before the evidence ever reached the table. So Vaya did something stronger than shouting. She let them think she was small. She placed one hand on the divorce envelope but did not open it. "Before I leave," she said, "I want to ask one question." Breck frowned. "This is not a negotiation." "I know," Vaya said. "That is why I am asking everyone, not just you." Her eyes moved slowly around the room. "Does everyone at this table agree that I brought nothing to this family?" The question made the air heavier. Tavon answered first. "You never belonged in business conversations." Penn finally looked up. "Don't make this dramatic." Orla's smile hardened. "The Calder name made you relevant," Naira said. "Leave before people start pitying you." Sable touched the rim of her glass. "Some women are stepping stones, some women are destinations." Vaya looked at Breck last. For one heartbeat she hoped he would remember himself. She hoped there was still one piece of the man who promised to protect her from his family. A memory flashed through her mind. Their wedding night, a quiet hallway, Breck holding both her hands and saying, "If my family ever makes you feel small, I will stand between you and them." Now he sat beside the woman helping them erase her. He said nothing. His silence answered everything. Vaya slipped off her wedding ring. It took effort because her finger trembled once, but she would not let them see her break. She placed the ring beside the divorce papers. "I hope every person at this table remembers what they said tonight," she said. No one laughed then, not even Sable. Vaya turned and walked toward the door. She did not beg. She did not explain. She did not tell them that the empire they were boasting about was already standing over a crack. As she passed Win, his eyes dropped to the folder under his hand. The label, Aldergate Payment Reconciliation, caught the light. For one small second, Win looked like a man silently asking for forgiveness. Vaya kept walking. Behind her, the family remained at the table, still believing they had thrown away a powerless woman. But the folder under Win's hand was not the only thing in that room with secrets. And the woman they had pushed toward the sideboard was the only person in the room with the legal power to make those secrets matter. Vaya almost turned the car around when Breck's first message arrived. The screen lit up on the passenger seat while rain slapped against the windshield. "Do not make tonight bigger than it has to be. Sign the papers." She stared at the words until the traffic light changed and a horn screamed behind her. For one dangerous second, her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Not because she wanted to go back, because part of her still could not believe the man who had once begged for her help could now speak to her like a problem to be handled. Another message came before she moved. "You know you cannot fight my family. Be realistic." Vaya drove forward. She did not go home. The house was no longer a home. It was a stage where they had practiced her removal. Instead, she drove to the private executive apartment Callan had arranged months earlier for Pillar Fox transition meetings. It was in a quiet high-rise used by corporate guests, attorneys, and board members who needed privacy. Vaya had never imagined she would enter it carrying divorce papers in one hand and her wedding ring in the other. At the front desk, Nell Crow, 57, the night concierge for the executive apartments and a polite stranger who knew Vaya only from her private business visits, looked up with concern. "Good evening, Mrs. Calder." Vaya stopped. The name felt heavy now. It felt like a coat someone had thrown over her shoulders and called gratitude. She lifted her chin. "Rook," she said softly. "Vaya Rook." Nell paused, then nodded with quiet respect. "Of course, Ms. Rook." That small correction nearly broke her. Inside the apartment, Vaya locked the door and stood still in the dark. The room smelled of clean linen and untouched furniture. A city of windows glowed beyond the glass, but all she could see was the dining table she had just left, the small chair near the sideboard, Sable beside Breck, Orla's satisfied smile, Naira recording her pain, Breck's voice saying, "You are useless, Vaya." She placed the divorce envelope on the table and opened it. The terms were worse than cruel. They were strategic. Breck offered her 6 months of small support, as if she had no life without his money. He wanted her to waive any claim to marital business assets. He wanted her to sign a confidentiality clause promising not to damage his reputation or the Calder name. He wanted her to leave the marital home quietly within 7 days. One clause made her go still. Any information learned by Vaya Calder during the marriage regarding Calder and Quain Buildworks, its investors, contractors, projects, or family business affairs shall remain confidential. Vaya understood it immediately. The divorce papers were not only about ending the marriage, they were designed to package her silence before Aldergate collapsed. At the bottom, Breck's signature sat clean and confident. He had not only planned to leave her. He had planned to lock the door behind her and call it dignity. Veya's phone buzzed again. This time it was Orla. A grateful woman leaves without making noise. Veya did not answer. A few seconds later, Naira's social media post appeared because someone had already tagged the family event. It was a cropped clip from the meeting. The video showed only Veya walking out, not the insults before it. The caption read, "Some people cannot handle growth." Under it, Sable had commented with one champagne glass emoji. Veya set the phone face down. For the first time that night her eyes filled, not because they had won, because they had edited the truth before her tears even dried. A knock came at the door. Veya did not move until she heard Callan's voice. "It's me." She opened the door. Callan entered carrying a flat leather case and a stack of sealed documents. His suit was damp from the rain. His face changed when he saw the divorce papers on the table, but he did not ask the wrong question. He did not ask if she was okay. He knew she was not. He only said, "Sit down before you have to be strong again." Those words loosened something in her chest. Veya sat. Callan placed the documents in front of her. "You are hurt, that is human. But if you act from hurt, they will call it revenge. If you act from evidence, they will call it enforcement." Veya looked at him. That sentence became the line between the woman who had been humiliated and the owner she now had to become. Callan opened the first folder. Pillafox Realty Group is legally under your controlling interest through the Rook Holding Trust. Holly's estate signed the final transfer. Your controlling interest was structured under your maiden name and trust entity, not through Calder marital assets. The internal board notice is scheduled. Until it is complete, your identity must stay confidential. Veya nodded slowly. He continued, "Calder and Quain is under contractor review. Because of your personal connection to Breck and his family, you should not direct the findings yourself. An independent compliance team must handle the investigation. So they cannot say I targeted them," Veya said. "Exactly." Veya looked toward the window. Rain ran down the glass like thin cracks. Callan lowered his voice. "Do not threaten them. Do not warn them personally. Do not mention ownership. Document everything. If there are violations, let procedure carry the weight." Veya touched the place where her ring had been. "I will not protect them," she said, "but I will not frame them either." Callan's expression softened. "That is why Holly's chose you." The name pulled her backward. She remembered Holly's in his old office years ago, a blanket across his knees, a contract open between them. He had been weaker then, but his eyes were still sharp. "Power is not loud, Veya," he had told her. "Loud men only want people to think they have it." He taught her how ownership structures worked. He taught her real estate financing, board votes, contract enforcement, and the quiet danger of weak clauses. He explained why buildings failed before anyone saw cracks. Sometimes it was bad steel. Sometimes it was unpaid workers. Sometimes it was pride. When his relatives wanted to sell Pillafox to investors who would strip the company and abandon its promises, Holly's refused. "You understand what buildings do to people," he told her. "Some men see land and think profit. You see families, workers, risk, and promises." That was why he transferred control to the Rook Holding Trust, not because Veya was lucky, because she had earned it in silence. Another knock came. This time it was Brielle. Brielle Knox, 34, Veya's closest friend from her finance career and the only person Veya trusted with the full story of Breck's rise, walked in carrying no advice, no judgment, and no forced strength. She took one look at Veya and put her arms around her. Veya held herself stiff for 1 second. Then the strength left her. She cried into Brielle's shoulder, quietly at first, then with the pain of every year she had swallowed to keep peace. Brielle held her and said, "He called you useless because he could not survive the truth that he needed you." Veya closed her eyes. For a few minutes she was not an owner, she was not a wife. She was simply a woman mourning the version of love she had tried to save. Then Callan's laptop chimed. He opened it and went still. The email was from Iris Bellwade, 49, Pillafox's chief compliance officer and the independent investigator assigned to contractor reviews. The subject line read, "Urgent, Calder and Quain ignored 2 document requests. Section 14.8 exposure possible." Callan read the message twice. Veya wiped her face and stood. "What does it mean?" Brielle asked. Callan looked at Veya. "It means Pillafox has already requested the missing records twice. If they ignore one final cure notice or create new safety risk, Pillafox can stop work under the contract." The room went silent. Veya looked at the divorce papers, then at the ownership folder bearing her maiden name. Her voice was low. "Then send the final cure notice, through compliance, not through me." Callan nodded. "That is the clean way." Outside, the rain kept falling. And somewhere far beyond the glass, the first machine at Alder Gate was already moving toward a day it might never finish. By 9 the next morning, Vea was sitting at the head of a Pillowfox conference table, looking at the first photograph that could stop her husband's entire project. It showed a stack of steel supports at the Alder Gate site. At first glance, the supports looked normal, clean, wrapped, ready for use. Then Dane Oryx, 44, Pillowfox's senior site safety auditor assigned to inspect the Alder Gate project, zoomed in on the label printed across the side. The steel was not the premium-grade Calder and Quain had billed for, it was cheaper, and according to Dane, it was not approved for the load-bearing section where Calder and Quain planned to use it. No one spoke for several seconds. Vea sat very still. Her face looked calm, but under the table her fingers pressed into her palm. Less than 12 hours earlier, Breck had called her useless in front of his family. Now she was looking at proof that the same family may have put workers, buyers, and Pillowfox at risk. Callan sat to her right, a legal pad open in front of him. Before the meeting began, he had repeated the rule in front of everyone. "You can observe," he told Vea. "The independent team decides. You may approve ordinary governance steps as owner, but you do not decide facts. Facts come from records." Vea had nodded because she understood why it mattered. If Pillowfox punished Calder and Quain only after Breck humiliated her, his family would claim she used ownership for revenge. So every finding had to come from records, inspectors, dates, notices, server logs, and witnesses. Evidence had to speak before emotion did. Iris stood near the screen with a folder in her hand. Her voice was sharp but controlled. Calder and Quain billed Pillowfox for premium structural materials in 3 separate payment requests, she said. But delivery records show cheaper substitutes arrived at the site 2 weeks later. The invoice numbers do not match the quality certificates submitted to us. Vea looked down at the table. She remembered Breck telling her once that construction was about trust. Now trust was appearing on a screen as a lie with a barcode. Iris changed the slide. Safety inspection confirmations were uploaded before the independent inspection was completed, she said. That means someone marked items as cleared before an inspector signed off. Dane added, if those materials went into the wrong section, it could trigger major liability. At best, forced removal and delay. At worst, structural review, lawsuits, and worker danger. The word danger stayed in the room. Vea lifted her eyes. What else? She asked. Iris turned another page. Subcontractors complained about late payments. Pillowfox released scheduled funds on time, but several workers and vendors remain unpaid. Callan wrote something down. Iris continued. Penn Calder signed for 2 compliance notices, but never uploaded the required responses. Server logs show the notices were opened, downloaded, and then ignored. Vea's chest tightened. Penn had sat at the family table and told her not to make things dramatic. He had already been hiding the notices that could damage them. And Breck? She asked before she could stop herself. Callan glanced at her, not warning, just reminding her to stay steady. Iris answered carefully. Breck submitted the public-facing project schedule. The schedule looked polished, but the dates do not match site logs. Several tasks are marked ahead of actual progress. That alone might be corrected. Combined with missing records, unpaid vendors, and unverified materials, it becomes part of a pattern. Vea heard Breck's voice from years ago. One day when I win, I'll make sure everyone knows you were there from the beginning. The memory came so clearly that for a moment she was back in their old apartment, before the expensive suits, before the Calder family started treating her silence like weakness. Breck had been standing in front of a mirror, practicing his first investor speech with shaking hands. Vea sat cross-legged on the floor, writing cue cards until after midnight. He forgot his opening line 6 times. She stayed patient each time. When he finally got it right, he turned around with wet eyes and said, "One day when I win, I'll make sure everyone knows you were there from the beginning." Now he was trying to erase the beginning. Vea blinked once and returned to the conference room. Iris placed the last sheet on the table. "There is also a note from Win Paris," she said. "Not a full whistleblower statement yet, but an internal accounting flag." Tavon pressured him to make cash flow look healthier than it was until the next Pillowfox payment came through. Callan looked up. "Is Win willing to speak?" "Not yet," Iris said, "but he is nervous." Vea thought of Win at the family meeting, his hand tight on the payment reconciliation folder. He had looked like a man holding a secret too heavy to carry. Across town, Breck still believed the problem was Vea. Inside the Calder and Quain office, he stood near the glass wall of Tavon's conference room while Sable paced beside Penn's laptop. Penn had the compliance portal open. Sable leaned over his shoulder. Investors do not care about paperwork unless you act scared, clean up the trail, control the story. Breck rubbed his forehead. Pillar Fox is pushing too hard. Sable turned to him. Then make it about your ex-wife. People always believe a bitter woman is emotional. Tressa sat at the end of the table drafting a statement on her tablet. We do not name her, she said. We imply something like, recent personal disruptions around Calder leadership have been exploited by outside parties attempting to slow progress. Orla sat nearby, cold and satisfied. Good. Let people know Veya is unstable without saying it directly. Tavon frowned. I do not care about Veya. I care about the payment schedule. Sable looked at Penn again. Delete anything that makes you look careless. If there is no trail, there is no story. Penn hesitated only a second, then he deleted messages from the compliance portal. He did not know Pillar Fox archived every server action. Back at Pillar Fox, Iris recommended immediate suspension. We have enough concern to stop work today, she said. The room waited for Veya. For one moment, the pain from the family meeting rose inside her. She saw Sable's smile. She heard Breck say useless. She remembered Orla calling her grateful. A weaker kind of revenge would have signed the stoppage right there, but Veya was not there to be weak. No, she said. Callan looked at her. Veya's voice stayed quiet. Send a final cure notice. Give them 5 business days to produce missing documents, verify materials, correct safety issues, explain payment discrepancies, and allow an independent site inspection. Iris studied her. That gives them time to hide more. Then document every attempt, Veya said. I want them given the chance to do the right thing. If they fail after that, no one can say they were ambushed. Callan nodded slowly. This was not mercy for Breck. It was protection for the truth. By evening, the notice went out under Pillar Fox letterhead. It did not carry Veya's name. It cited contract sections, missed responses, safety concerns, material verification issues, payment discrepancies, and the possible use of Section 14.8 if Calder and Quain failed to comply. Veya went back to the executive apartment after dark. Brielle was waiting with coffee neither of them touched. You could have stopped them today, Brielle said. I know. Why didn't you? Veya looked out the window. Because when it happens, I want even their own lies to point at them. Late that night, Callan called. His voice was lower than usual. Someone inside Calder and Quain uploaded photos from the Aldergate site. Veya stood. Who? Anonymous, Callan said, but the metadata points to their accounting office. Veya thought of Wynne. Callan sent the images. The first photo showed materials stacked near the west frame. The second showed the same materials beside a temporary work route. The third showed a worker standing close enough to prove the area was active. The final photo showed the label clearly. Across it, in plain words, were the words, not approved for load-bearing use. Veya stared at the image until the room seemed to grow colder. Somewhere inside Calder and Quain, someone had finally stopped protecting the secret. And soon, the machines at Aldergate would have to answer for what the people had hidden. For the next 2 weeks, Calder and Quain sent partial files, blamed portal errors, requested extensions, and promised corrected records that never fully arrived. Each weak response gave Pillar Fox more documentation. Each delay made the cure notice stronger. By the time the final deadline approached, Veya no longer had to wonder whether they would do the right thing. Calder and Quain was choosing its answer in writing. The final cure notice deadline expired at 7:03 a.m., and by 7:06, the Calder and Quain office felt like a bomb had gone off. Tavon stood in the conference room with the printed notice shaking in his hand. His face had lost its color. Penn kept refreshing the compliance portal as if the words might change if he looked at them long enough. Breck paced near the glass wall, still wearing the same confidence he used in public, but his eyes were sharp with fear. The notice had been clear for 2 weeks. Calder and Quain had 5 business days to produce missing documents, verify materials, correct safety issues, explain payment gaps, and allow an independent site inspection. If they failed, Pillar Fox could suspend work under Section 14.8. The notice also warned them not to move investors, visitors, or non-essential workers through any flagged section until inspection holds were cleared. That warning mattered because even if Calder and Quain still argued about paperwork, moving outsiders through a flagged area would create a separate safety violation strong enough to trigger immediate suspension. That line was the one Penn refused to read twice. Breck snatched the paper from Tavon. Is this serious? He asked Penn. Penn did not look at him. No, Penn said too quickly. Pillar Fox is just flexing because old management changed. New people always want to look tough. Tavon slammed his fist on the table. Then we make sure they understand who they are dealing with. Sable stood near Breck, calm in a pale blazer, looking more like a partner than a consultant now. She did not seem afraid. She looked excited, as if crisis was another stage where she could perform. Then make them look unreasonable first, she said. Do not let Pillar Fox control the story. Tressa, seated at the far end of the table with her tablet open, nodded. We turn it into confidence. Hold the investor walkthrough today. Show progress. Show machines. Show Breck leading. Make the public see Aldergate as unstoppable. Breck stopped packing. That could work. It will work, Sable said, stepping closer. Investors believe what they see, so let them see motion. No one in the room said the obvious thing. Motion could not erase missing documents. A camera angle could not fix unsafe materials. A speech could not pay subcontractors. But pride had always been easier for the Colders than truth. By noon, Aldergate was dressed like a victory. Workers were told to keep busy near the main entrance. Fresh banners were hung along the fencing. Naira arrived with 2 phones and a bright smile, ready to post clips. Orla came dressed like she was attending a celebration. Tavon greeted investors with a laugh too loud to be natural. Breck arrived last with Sable at his side. This time, he did not hide her. She walked beside him openly, her hand resting briefly on his arm whenever cameras lifted. Orla introduced her to 2 investors with a proud smile. This is Sable, Orla said. She is the woman helping Breck step into his real future. Naira caught the line on video. Across the site, Wynne watched from near a temporary office trailer. He held a clipboard, but he was not reading it. His eyes moved from Breck to the stacked materials near the west frame, then to the investors being guided closer than they should have been. He knew the area was not cleared. He knew some materials had not been verified. He knew the cure notice had been received. And he knew they were pretending none of it mattered. A memory returned to him from the family meeting. Vaya standing alone near the small chair, asking, "Does everyone at this table agree that I brought nothing?" Wynne had said nothing that night. His silence had felt safe then. Now it felt like a stain. Breck gathered the investors near the model board and began speaking. Aldergate represents strength, he said. There has been noise around this project, but noise does not stop progress. Calder & Quain has always delivered. Sable smiled at him like every word was gold. Tressa typed fast on her phone. Within minutes, captions began moving through small gossip pages and industry feeds. Contractor's bitter ex-wife rumored to be stirring trouble after divorce. Aldergate team pushes forward despite personal drama. Breck Calder refuses to let private issues slow public progress. They did not use Vaya's name. They did not have to. Everyone close enough to the Calder family knew exactly who they meant. At Pillar Fox, Vaya sat in a closed office with Callan and Iris. On the table before them was the same cure notice, a copy of the anonymous photos, and a live compliance update from the site. An internal board notice had gone out that morning under the name Vaya Rook, controlling owner, Pillar Fox Realty Group. It was official inside Pillar Fox now, but it had not been announced publicly, and contractor-facing documents still used formal titles, not personal history. Breck had not connected Vaya Rook to Vaya Calder. He had never cared enough about her old name. During their marriage, when she mentioned being a Rook, he would smile and say, "You are a Calder now, that is the name people respect." Now that same arrogance protected her secret. Vaya watched a clip Naira had posted. In it, Breck stood at Aldergate with Sable beside him, promising progress. Sable looked polished, certain, victorious. For a moment, Vaya felt the old pain return, not because Sable had won Breck, but because Breck had made betrayal look like branding. Callan noticed her expression. "You do not have to watch their posts." "Yes, I do," Vaya said quietly. "If they are using lies as a tool, then the lies become part of the record." Iris nodded. "Our team is already archiving everything." On the site, a subcontractor stepped close to Penn while Breck spoke to investors. He was Jarrow Meeks, 40, a framing crew lead whose workers had been waiting 2 weeks for payment. "When are we getting paid?" Jarrow asked in a low voice. "My crew has been waiting 2 weeks. Pillar Fox released funds. Where did they go?" Penn's face tightened. "Not here." Sable heard enough. She pulled Breck aside, her smile still fixed for cameras. "Do not let unpaid workers ruin the optics," she whispered. "Blame Pillar Fox delays." Breck returned to the group and raised his voice. "Some payment processes have slowed because Pillar Fox is going through internal changes," he said. "But Calder & Quain is pushing ahead. We do not stop because someone in an office gets nervous. At Pillar Fox, Iris froze the video. That statement is false, she said. Pillar Fox released scheduled funds. Callan wrote it down, and now it is public. Vaya stared at the frozen image of Breck. He was still performing confidence, still thinking she was somewhere broken and powerless, still thinking her silence meant defeat. Her voice was low. He learned nothing. Then Iris's phone rang. Answered, listened, and her expression changed. What happened? Callan asked. Iris put the call on speaker. A field inspector's voice came through, tense and controlled. He was Rafe Lomax, 39, a Pillar Fox field inspector stationed at Aldergate to monitor the cure notice. They allowed investors into the West Frame area, Rafe said. That section was flagged for inspection hold after the material questions. Vaya's hand closed around the edge of the table. Callan stood. They did what? They walked investors through it, Rafe said. Workers were moving near the mislabeled supports. We documented it with time-stamped photos and video. The room went silent. The cure notice had warned them. The photos had warned them. The unpaid workers had warned them. Still, Calder and Quain had chosen image over safety. Callan turned to Vaya, his face serious now. That activates section 14.8. We can stop work immediately. Iris placed a prepared document on the table. The order is ready. Compliance recommends enforcement. Vaya looked down. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, Stop Work Order, Aldergate District. Her hand trembled once, not from doubt, from grief, because signing it meant accepting that the man she once protected had become someone who would risk truth, workers, and public safety just to look powerful for one more day. Then her hand steadied. Vaya picked up the pen. She signed her name, Vaya Rook. Outside the Pillar Fox windows, the afternoon light faded across the glass, and at Aldergate, the machines kept moving, unaware that silence was already on its way. The first bulldozer stopped so suddenly that every head at Aldergate turned toward it. 1 second, the construction site was roaring with engines, shouted orders, reversing alarms, and grinding steel. The next second, one yellow machine froze in place with its blade half lowered toward the dirt. Then a second bulldozer stopped. Then a crane locked. Then 2 concrete trucks waiting near the east gate were waved backward by site security. The noise did not die all at once. It fell in pieces, like a building losing its supports 1 floor at a time. Workers lowered their tools. Investors stopped mid-conversation. Dust drifted across the site and hung in the afternoon light, as if even the wind was waiting to see who would speak first. Breck stood near the project model board in dark glasses, Sable beside him, his hand still raised from the speech he had been giving. Moments earlier, he had smiled at the investors and said, "This is the future. Nothing stops Aldergate." Now Aldergate was stopping in front of him. Dover rushed across the dirt toward the lead bulldozer. "Why are you shutting down?" he shouted at the operator. Before the man could answer, Dane entered through the main gate with 2 Pillar Fox compliance officers and a pair of site security supervisors. He did not hurry. That made the moment worse. He walked with the calm of someone who was not asking permission. In his hand was a sealed order. Tavon saw the Pillar Fox logo first. His face tightened. Penn, standing near the temporary office trailer, went pale before anyone even explained why. His eyes darted toward Wynne, who stood beside the trailer with a clipboard held close to his chest. Wynne did not move. That stillness told Penn enough. Dane stopped in front of Dover and handed him the document. Effective immediately, all work on the Aldergate district is suspended pending compliance review. Dover opened the order. His eyes moved fast over the page. "This cannot be right," he said. Dane's voice remained steady. "It is right. Section 14.8. Safety and compliance suspension. All active equipment must power down. All deliveries must be turned away. No investor or non-essential personnel should remain in restricted zones." Breck tore off his sunglasses. "Who authorized this?" Dane looked at him. "Pillar Fox Realty Group." "That is not an answer," Breck snapped. "It is the only answer that matters on this site." The investors shifted uncomfortably. One of them whispered to another. Naira had been recording, but her phone slowly lowered when she realized the scene was no longer flattering. Orla stepped closer to Tavon. "This is because of Vaya, isn't it?" she said bitterly, even though she still did not know the truth. That girl could never leave quietly. Sable heard her and immediately looked toward the investors. "Careful," she whispered to Breck. "Make this look like their mistake. Investors are watching." Breck heard her. Pride took over before sense could stop him. He raised his voice so everyone nearby could hear. "This is a sabotage attempt," he said. "Pillar Fox is overreacting to paperwork because their internal people cannot manage a transition. Calder and Quain has met every major obligation. Dane did not argue. That calmness only made Breck angrier. Tavon grabbed the order from Dover and searched the final page for a name. His hand stopped at the signature block. V. Rook. Tavon frowned. Who is V. Rook? Breck gave a bitter laugh. I do not care who V. Rook is. Get them on the phone. Penn looked down. For the first time that morning, he seemed to understand that deleted messages were not gone just because he could no longer see them. Wynn's hand tightened around his clipboard. Sable stepped half a pace away from Breck. It was small, almost invisible, but Vaya would have noticed it if she had been standing there. Sable was already measuring how far she needed to be from a man losing power. Then Callan arrived. He came through the gate in a dark suit, holding a leather folder. No raised voice, no rush, no drama. He walked past the staring workers and stopped in front of Breck. Mr. Calder, Callan said, every warning was documented, every notice was received, every ignored request is archived. Breck stared at him. You are the lawyer. Yes. Then you can explain why your client thinks they can shut down my site. Callan opened the folder. Pillar Fox issued 2 document requests before the final cure notice. Calder and Quain failed to produce required records. You held an investor walkthrough in an area flagged for inspection hold. You made public statements blaming Pillar Fox delays after scheduled funds had already been released. You also continued activity around materials not verified for their intended use. Tavon's mouth tightened. Orla looked at Penn. Is that true? Penn said nothing. That silence moved through the family like smoke. Breck stepped closer to Callan. I want the owner here. Callan's eyes did not change. She is on her way. She, Sable repeated before she could stop herself. Callan looked at her only briefly. Yes. A strange quiet followed. Breck looked back at the stopped machines. The bulldozers were still. The cranes were locked. The trucks were gone. For the first time in years, the world around him did not move when he demanded it. Inside a black company vehicle parked beyond the gate, Vaya watched through tinted glass. She was not smiling. There was no victory in watching a project freeze when workers were still waiting to be paid and honest people might suffer because powerful people had lied. There was no joy in seeing Breck humiliated, even after everything he had done. She remembered the family meeting, the small chair near the sideboard, Sable's soft smile. Orla's voice saying the Calder name made her relevant. Breck saying she was useless, her wedding ring sitting beside the divorce papers like evidence of a life she had tried to protect. Her hand rested on the Pillar Fox folder in her lap. She had not come to perform revenge. She had come because the owner of the company had a duty to the project, the workers, the investors, and the truth. Outside, Breck was still arguing. I do not care what some hidden owner thinks, he said. Bring her out here. Callan turned toward the black vehicle. Breck followed his gaze. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Vaya emerged in a plain cream suit, her hair pinned back, no wedding ring on her hand. She held the Pillar Fox folder close to her side. For 1 second, Breck looked annoyed, as if her presence was another interruption. Then confusion crossed his face. Then something colder. Fear. Callan stepped aside and said, Mr. Calder, you asked for the owner. And the woman Breck had called useless walked toward the silence his machines had left behind. Breck looked at Vaya like she had stepped out of the wrong life. For a few seconds, no one moved. The bulldozers were still. The cranes were locked. Concrete trucks had already been turned away. Workers stood in dusty silence. Investors watched from behind site barriers, their faces tight with confusion and fear. Vaya walked toward Breck with the Pillar Fox folder in her hand. No wedding ring, no tears. No raised voice, just calm steps across the ground where his empire had stopped moving. Breck's face hardened first because anger was easier than understanding. What are you doing here? He demanded. Vaya stopped a few feet from him. My job. Sable gave a nervous laugh, sharp and false. This is embarrassing. Someone tell her this is not the place for divorce drama. Vaya did not look at Sable. Callan stepped forward. His voice stayed even, but it carried across the quiet site. Ms. Rook is the controlling owner of Pillar Fox Realty Group. The words did not explode, they spread. One worker turned to another. One investor lowered his phone. Naira's hand dropped slowly until her camera pointed at the dirt. Tavon looked back at the stop work order as if the ink might change. Penn's face drained of color. Orla opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Sable's smile disappeared. Breck stared at Vaya. Rook, he whispered. Vaya held his gaze. My name before your family taught me to make myself smaller. For the first time since Vaya had known him, Breck had no answer ready. The silence was deeper than shouting would have been. Vaya opened the Pillar Fox folder and handed the first file to Iris, who had arrived with the compliance team moments earlier. Vea could have read the findings herself. She could have enjoyed saying every word, but she did not come to perform revenge. She let the investigators speak. Iris stepped beside Callan and addressed Breck, Tavon, the investors and the site supervisors. Calder and Quain received 2 compliance document requests before the final cure notice, she said. Both were opened and ignored. The final notice required missing records, material verification, safety corrections, payment explanations, and access for inspection. The contractor failed to comply. Tavon's eyes jumped to Penn. Penn stared at the ground. Iris continued, "We found evidence of material substitutions. Calder and Quain billed Pillafox for premium structural materials, but delivery records and site photos show cheaper materials were delivered for sections requiring verification." A worker near the barrier muttered something under his breath. Dane handed Iris another page. "Safety confirmations were uploaded before independent inspection was completed," Iris said. "That means the system showed areas as cleared before they were properly reviewed." Breck shook his head. "That is paperwork." "No," Dane said firmly, "that is risk." The word made several investors step back. Iris kept going. Pillafox released scheduled funds, yet subcontractors reported late payments. Several progress dates submitted by Breck Calder do not match site logs. Deleted portal messages were recovered through archived server records. Calder and Quain also conducted an investor walkthrough in a flagged area after receiving notice of inspection concerns. Callan added, and Mr. Calder made public statements accusing Pillafox of causing payment delays after funds had already been released. Breck looked trapped now. Sable shifted farther away from him. Then Wynne stepped forward. His face was pale, but his voice did not shake as much as Vea expected. "I sent the photos," he said. Penn's head snapped up. "You?" Wynne looked at him, then at Vea. "I should have spoken sooner. I saw the notices, I saw the materials, I saw the payment records. I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing my job." Penn moved toward him. "You snake." Callan's voice cut through the space. "Any retaliation against a whistleblower will be added to the record." Penn stopped. Wynne lowered his eyes. "After the family meeting, I kept hearing what she asked. Whether everyone agreed she brought nothing." He swallowed. "Said nothing then. I could not keep saying nothing." Vea felt the words touch something deep in her. She did not forgive his silence, not yet, but she understood the courage it took to stop being silent in a family that punished truth. Tavon's arrogance broke first. He stepped toward Vea, holding the stop-work order in one hand. "Vea," he said, and for the first time his voice did not sound commanding. It sounded old. "We are family. You cannot do this to us." Vea turned to him. "Family was the word you used when you needed my silence. Contract is the word that applies today." Orla found her voice then brittle and angry. "After everything we gave you," Vea looked at her without blinking, "you gave me a small chair beside a sideboard and called it my place." Orla recoiled as if the sentence had struck her. Breck stepped closer. His voice changed. It softened, not with love but with strategy. "Vea," he said, "I was angry. Sable pushed things. My family pushed things. You know me." Vea looked at the man she had once stayed up all night helping, the man she had once believed would stand between her and every insult. "I knew the man who needed me," she said. "I met the man you became at that table." Breck's face twisted. Sable suddenly lifted her hands, trying to separate herself from the collapse. "I was only a consultant," she said. "I had nothing to do with documents." Iris opened another file. "That is not accurate." Sable froze. Iris read from printed emails. "You advised Breck Calder and Penn Calder to clean up the trail before investor concerns spread. You also coordinated with Tressa Lawn on a public-facing narrative suggesting delays were caused by Pillafox bureaucracy and personal bitterness from Breck's ex-wife." Tressa went still near Naira. Callan handed 2 envelopes to Nemo Reed, 41, a Pillafox site security supervisor responsible for serving formal notices during the shutdown. Nemo delivered them to Sable and Tressa. "These are legal preservation notices," Callan said. "They require preservation of communications related to reputational interference, contractor compliance discussions, and public statements concerning Pillafox." Sable stared at the envelope like it was something dirty. Her power had always lived in image, in perfect clothes, careful captions, and whispers that destroyed women without leaving fingerprints. Now her image had become evidence. Around them, investors began speaking in low voices. One asked Tavon whether lender disclosures had been updated. Another asked Breck whether the safety issue had been shared before the walkthrough. No one sounded impressed anymore. They sounded afraid. Breck turned back to Vea, desperation cracking through his pride. "What do you want?" he asked. An apology, money, the house, I'll give you anything. Veya's face did not change. You still think I came here because I want something from you? That answer silenced him. Then Callan's phone buzzed. He read the message, and his expression shifted just enough for Tavon to notice. What? Tavon demanded. What now? Callan leaned toward Veya and spoke quietly, but Tavon was close enough to hear. The lenders have been notified. Their financing clause just triggered. Tavon's knees almost bent beneath him. Pen grabbed the side of the site table. Orla clutched her purse. Breck looked from Callan to Veya, as if he still did not understand how fast an empire could fall once the money behind it stopped believing. The project stoppage was no longer just a delay. It was the first sound of financial collapse, and across the silent site, the stopped bulldozers looked less like machines now and more like witnesses. By the next morning, Calder and Quain was no longer a construction company managing a crisis. It was a company being surrounded. The first call came from the lenders before sunrise, then another, then 3 more. Emergency meetings were placed on the calendar without asking Tavon if he was available. Investors who had once waited outside Breck's office now refused to take his calls. Subcontractors sent payment demands. Pillar Fox's legal team delivered formal notices. Every door that had opened for the Calder name began closing from the other side. Breck stood in the Calder and Quain conference room while his phone rang again and again. No one in the room looked powerful anymore. Tavon sat at the head of the table, staring at a loan document like it had betrayed him. Penn stood near the window with both hands in his pockets, his face grey. Orla kept calling people from her social circle, but each conversation ended faster than the last. Nara deleted the post she had made about Veya, but screenshots were already spreading through private investor chats. The damage was not gossip anymore, it was paperwork. The Aldergate project had been used as collateral for major loans. Once Pillar Fox suspended work and notified lenders of the compliance breach, financing clauses triggered. Investors began withdrawing support. Subcontractors filed claims for unpaid work. Pillar Fox formally opened termination review for cause because Calder and Quain had ignored warnings, failed the cure process, allowed investors into a flagged area, and submitted false or incomplete records. This was not sudden ruin. This was a tower falling after years of weak beams. Breck slammed his hand on the table. Pillar Fox cannot just take the project. Tavon looked up slowly. They can if we breached the contract. Penn snapped. We would have been fine if Wynne kept his mouth shut. Orla turned on him. You signed for the notices, Penn. You said it was routine. Penn's face twisted. Because you all wanted it to be routine. That was the first time the family began blaming each other instead of Veya. Across town, Sable was trying to save herself. She sat in a quiet lounge with Tressa, wearing dark glasses though they were indoors. Her phone had not stopped buzzing. 2 consulting clients had paused contracts. One investor's wife had removed her from a private charity committee. A developer she had been courting sent only one sentence: "We cannot be associated with your current exposure." Sable threw the phone onto the table. I never told them to delete anything, she said. I was managing optics. Tressa looked at her without warmth. You wrote clean up the trail in an email. That is not the same thing. It is close enough for lawyers. Sable leaned forward. Then fix it. Tressa's face was calm. After that preservation notice, I gave Callan copies of the messages. Sable went still. You what? I am not going down for your romance with a man whose company cannot pay its own crews. Sable stared at her, finally understanding how quickly allies became witnesses when reputation was threatened. By afternoon, Sable went to Breck. She expected him to protect her. She expected anger, plans, maybe money. She expected the man who once looked like a rising empire. Instead, she found him in his office surrounded by boxes. Tavon had removed him from Executive Project Authority pending investigation. Breck's access to Aldergate files had been restricted. His name was being discussed by lenders as a liability. Sable stopped in the doorway. Breck looked up. You came. Her eyes moved over the boxes, the empty wall where his framed project photo had been, the unanswered calls lighting up his phone. What happens now? She asked. He laughed once without humor. You tell me. You were the expert on image. Sable's mouth tightened. Do not put this on me. You told me to blame Pillar Fox. You chose to say it. You told Penn to clean up the trail. You let him. The silence between them was ugly because both of them were right. Sable took one step back. Breck saw it. The woman who had wanted to stand beside his future did not know how to stand beside his fall. You are leaving, he said. Sable lifted her chin. I have to protect my name. Breck stared at her, and for the first time he understood the cruelty of being measured only by usefulness. She left without touching him. The door closed softly. It sounded louder than shouting. At Pillar Fox, Vaya sat in a conference room with Callan and Iris. Brielle was there too, not as legal support, but because Vaya had asked her to stay nearby. The table held files from subcontractors, safety reports, termination documents, and a list of unpaid workers whose claims needed review. Pillar Fox had enough evidence to terminate Calder and Quain for cause after the cure period and documented violations. Callan explained each step again, making sure every decision had support. No shortcuts, Vaya said. Callan nodded. No shortcuts, Iris added. We also have 3 replacement contractor teams under review, clean records, strong safety history. They can restart after a full site assessment. Vaya looked at the list of unpaid subcontractors. What about the crews? We are not legally responsible for every payment Calder and Quain mishandled, Callan said carefully. But we can create a review fund tied to verified work and recover against Calder and Quain later. Brielle looked at Vaya. That is more than most owners would do. Vaya's voice was quiet. The workers did not call me useless. That was the difference. She would not save Breck from consequences, but she would not let innocent people pay for his arrogance if there was a lawful way to help. Later that evening, Breck came to Pillar Fox. Callan was present when Vaya agreed to see him. She did not meet him alone, not after the lies, not after the public smear, not after learning how easily love could be twisted into leverage. Breck entered the room looking smaller than Vaya had ever seen him. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were tired, his pride was still there but cracked. I made mistakes, he said. Vaya said nothing, but you did not have to take everything. She looked at him for a long moment. I did not take everything, she said. I stopped holding up what was already falling. His jaw tightened. I loved you, he said. Vaya felt the words land, but they no longer had the power they once did. Once she would have built a bridge toward him from those 3 words. Now she heard what was missing from them. You loved being loved by me, she said. That is not the same thing. Breck looked away. For the first time he had no crowd, no mother, no mistress, no table of witnesses to make him feel taller. Only the woman he had called useless, and the truth that she had been the strongest thing in his life. When he left the conference room, he walked slowly through the Pillar Fox lobby. That was when he saw the new wall display being installed. Aldergate District Relaunch, led by Vaya Rook, Pillar Fox Realty Group. Under the title was a quote from Holly's Vein. The safest hands are often the ones nobody clapped for. Breck stopped in front of it. His reflection appeared faintly in the glass over the words. Behind his reflection was Vaya's name, steady and permanent. He finally understood. He had not just lost a wife. He had lost the woman who had been protecting his future. And now, for the first time, Vaya's name would be spoken in rooms where his no longer opened doors. The bulldozers roared again at Aldergate, but this time, no one moved until Vaya gave the signal. For a moment, the whole site waited on her. Workers stood in clean safety lines. Inspectors checked their tablets. Board members watched from a raised platform. Community guests gathered near the new entrance, where fresh banners carried the Pillar Fox name instead of Calder and Quain. The old dust had been cleared. The unsafe materials had been removed. The late subcontractor claims had been reviewed. The lies that once moved through this place had been replaced with signatures, inspections, and honest records. Vaya stood near the front in a white hard hat with one word printed across it. Rook. She was not hiding behind anyone now. Months earlier, Breck had stood on this same ground and said nothing could stop Aldergate. Then the machines froze, and the world learned that the quiet woman he called useless had been the owner of the company paying his family's contract. Now the machines were moving again, not because the Calders had been forgiven, because Vaya had rebuilt the project the right way. Beside her stood Callan, Brielle, Iris, and Wynne. Wynne looked thinner than before but steadier. Pillar Fox had protected him as a whistleblower, and although his future was still uncertain, he no longer looked like a man drowning in secrets. A few steps away stood Marlo Venn, 50, the lead representative of Northline Civic Builders, the replacement contractor chosen by Pillar Fox to finish Aldergate after Calder and Quain was terminated for cause. Marlo had a clean safety record, a quiet voice, and a habit of answering questions with documents instead of promises. Vaya liked that about him. When Marlo gave her a nod, Vaya looked toward the equipment supervisor. She lifted one hand. The first bulldozer moved, the crowd clapped. The sound was not wild or loud. It was steady, respectful, earned. Brielle leaned close and whispered, "Listen to that." Vaya did. For years, applause had always gone around her. It had landed on Breck, Tavon, Orla, even Sable when she entered rooms pretending to be important. Vea had grown used to being the hand behind the curtain, the voice in the draft. The note passed quietly before disaster struck, but today the applause found her. She walked to the small podium set near the project model. The model had changed since Breck's version. Pillar Fox had added worker safety stations, public walkways, better inspection access, and a community hiring office. Vea had not only saved the project, she had improved what it was meant to become. A reporter raised a hand. He was Lennox Hale, 43, a local business journalist who had covered the shutdown and the relaunch from the first stop work order. Ms. Rook, Lennox asked, some people are saying this relaunch is also a personal victory for you after what happened with Calder and Quain. Is that how you see it? Cameras lifted. Vea felt the old version of herself inside that question. The humiliated wife, the woman at the sideboard, the woman Breck called useless. For one breath she remembered the dining room clearly, the divorce papers, Naira's phone, Sable's smile, Tavon's dismissal, Orla's pride, Penn's silence. Then she looked at the workers behind the barrier. She looked at the families waiting for jobs. She looked at the site that had almost become another monument to arrogance. No, Vea said, this is not personal victory, this is accountability. Projects should not move because powerful people shout loudly. It should move because the records are clean, the workers are safe, and the promises are real. The crowd grew quiet. Vea continued, Aldergate stopped because people ignored warnings. It is moving again because people finally respected them. Callan looked down, almost smiling. Brielle's eyes filled. Wynne lowered his head, not in shame this time, but relief. Across the street, behind the public barrier, Breck watched from beside a parked car. He had not been invited. No one from Calder and Quain had been. Tavon was fighting lender claims. Penn was under investigation for deleted compliance records. Orla no longer received calls from the people who once praised her family. Naira had vanished from public posting after her edited clips became part of the reputational complaint. Sable had lost the polished rooms she once entered with confidence. And Tressa had saved herself by becoming a witness before anyone could make her the sacrifice. Breck stood alone. He had come because some part of him needed to see whether Vea was really standing where he used to stand. She was, and she looked stronger than he remembered. Not louder, not colder, stronger. When the ceremony ended, Breck walked toward the exit path, but Vea saw him before he could disappear. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. He lifted one hand slightly, as if he wanted to speak. Maybe he wanted to apologize. Maybe he wanted to ask for another meeting. Maybe he wanted to explain that he had been under pressure, that Sable had influenced him, that his family had pushed him, that fear had made him cruel. But Vea no longer needed his explanation to understand her own worth. She gave him one small nod, not an invitation, not forgiveness, a final acknowledgement that the past had existed. Then she turned back to the project. Breck lowered his hand. That was the moment he truly lost her, not at the dining table, not when the bulldozers stopped, not when Callan announced she owned Pillar Fox. He lost her when she no longer needed him to regret what he had done. Vea walked with Marlowe toward the west frame, where the unsafe materials had once been stacked. New steel waited there now, inspected, certified, and logged. Dane stood beside the checklist. Iris reviewed the final safety confirmation. Nothing moved until the record matched the ground. That was Vea's rule, no performance before proof. As the bulldozers worked, Wynne approached her quietly. Ms. Rook, he said. Vea turned. I know speaking up late does not erase staying silent, he said, but thank you for protecting me after I finally did. Vea looked at him for a long moment. Do not thank me, she said. Use the second chance properly. Wynne nodded. I will. He walked away lighter than he had arrived. Brielle came to Vea's side again. You know Hollies would have loved this. Vea looked toward the hard hat in her hand, then toward the cranes rising cleanly against the sky. He would have asked why it took everyone so long to listen, she said. Brielle laughed softly. For the first time in months, Vea laughed too. The sound surprised her. It did not erase the pain. It did not undo the betrayal. It did not return the years she had spent making herself smaller so Breck could feel large, but it proved something. She was still here, not as Breck's wife, not as the Calder's quiet helper, not as the woman at the sideboard, as Vea Rook, the owner, the decision-maker, the woman nobody clapped for until the machines stopped and the truth stepped out of the black car. Later that evening, when the site emptied and the sun lowered behind the frame of Aldergate, Vea stood alone near the place where Breck had once demanded to see the owner. The ground was quiet now, not dead quiet, peaceful quiet, the kind that comes after noise has finally told the truth. Callan approached with a folder. The final divorce response is ready. No confidentiality clause, no waiver of your independent assets, no false narrative. Vaya took the folder, but did not open it. Send it, she said. Callan nodded. And Calder and Quain, proceed with recovery actions for verified damages, Vaya said. Pay the verified crew claims through the review fund. Keep every record clean. Already in motion. Vaya looked at Aldergate one more time. The building was not finished yet. Neither was she. But for the first time, the unfinished thing did not feel like a wound. It felt like a future. And somewhere beyond the locked gates of his shrinking company, Breck Calder finally understood the truth too late. The woman he called useless had been the one holding the contract. The woman he mocked had been the one holding the evidence. The woman he divorced had been the one holding the power behind his empire. And when the bulldozers stopped, they did not stop for revenge. They stopped because Vaya Rook finally stopped saving people who were willing to destroy her. So if you have ever been underestimated, mocked, betrayed, or pushed into the small chair while others took credit for your strength, remember Vaya's story. Stay quiet only long enough to gather the truth, then rise where they can no longer edit you out. Please subscribe, share this story, and comment where you are watching from.